To you today, and when I say talk, I mean really talk. But before I can talk, I've got to read because I want to share a rather lengthy Bible story. It's not a complete biography, but I want to share a story before I get to where I want to talk. I want to talk about memorials and miracles and the memory. And especially, I want to wrap up with a memory. Now, if you're my age, you already suspect that there's some old age thing coming here, but there's not. This is not an age factor that you might lose your memory. This is an anybody factor. And of course, what I'm referring to, I will just wrap up in 2 Psalms, and there are a dozen verses we could read. But Psalm 103 and 2, David wrote, Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits. There's a powerful reason that that's an important statement coming from David. Because when David wrote this, it might have been easy for him to forget all the Lord's benefits. When your life hasn't gone exactly as planned, it's easy to forget the benefits of the Lord. Some would say, well, he was a shepherd, he became a king. What's he got to complain about? Well, let's see. He ran for his life for a long time. He literally hid in the caves of Adullam for a long time. He knew the king and the king's army was after him. He had to outsmart them. That's pretty tough for a shepherd boy. They would have killed him had they got a hold of him. He had experienced that. It's of little value that he eventually became the king, and the women of Israel sang his song. Saul has slain his thousands, but David his tens of thousands. Okay, he's a hero, a little cult folk hero. And then he gets lifted up in himself. And he thinks he can have any woman that he wants because he's king. And he takes one, and then he winds up really messing up with her, and she becomes pregnant. And David's solution, let's kill her husband. Well, actually, he brought her husband home first to give him some kind of odd leave time from the army, hoping that everybody would assume the baby would be his when the evidence became clear that she was pregnant. The only problem was David had no clue what an honorable man this was. So David arranges secretly for him to get a leave and a reprieve from the army, from the war. And he comes home, and because his fellow soldiers are still out there in battle, he won't even go in and stay with his wife in intimacy. He sleeps on the porch. So all the people in the village realize what an honorable man he is. He won't even enjoy his comfortable home as long as his fellow soldiers are out there living in the dirt, grabbing a few moments of sleep a night just to get up and bloodshed the next morning. He should be there in battle. He doesn't know why he's home, but he is not going to indulge in comfort and sleep and intimacy when his fellow soldiers can't. And that messes David's plan up. And so David conspires to have him murdered. And then God says, I'm going to punish you because you are an evil man and murderous of that. Sends a prophet to let him know you've done it. David gets upset at the prophet's story. A man that had all the sheep he needed stole one little ewe lamb from a poor. You tell me the name of that guy and I'll have him. And then the prophet said, thou art the man. This is what you've done by taking one woman from a man. And his story is not good. It's kind of pitiful. And God punished him, and then God punished him again because he made some foolish choices as king. And the prophets would say, look, here's your choice. You fall into the hands of an angry God, or you let the nation fall into the hands of a conquering army. And so you understand, it'd be pretty easy at some point when you become an older man to just say, look how horrible my life has been, and forget all the good benefits from the Lord. So you with me now? I want you to kind of grasp this concept. When David wrote, bless the Lord, O my soul, and do not forget all of his benefits. He wasn't trying to write a poem. He was reminding himself, no matter how bad life looks sometimes and how many messes I make, I must never forget the benefits of serving the Lord. In Psalm 119 and 16, I will not forget thy word. Okay, you got me there? Just hang on right there, and let's talk about Hezekiah. Hezekiah, son of Ahaz the king, he became the king of Judah. Remember, Judah and Israel split in two tribes. And so that's why they had separate kings and separate prophets. And so the king of Judah was Hezekiah. For one time, Hezekiah he inherited his position. He was a descendant, the lineage of David. His name in the Hebrew is pretty cool. I won't get this right, but it's something like Kiskiyah. We English-ize it, it's Hezekiah. But in the Hebrew, it's Kiskiyah. And Kiskiyah meant Jehovah is my strength. Good man. Tore down the high places that had been built for idols. Made sure Israel just worshiped and served the one true God. You'll find his story written both in 2 Kings, in 1 Chronicles, and in the prophet Isaiah's book. There was a time when Sennacherib, the powerful king of Assyria, came against Judah. It was in Hezekiah's 14th year. The advance party that came out to let them know that we're coming, we're going to destroy you. They mocked Hezekiah. They promised horses and chariots to his army. And when a couple of the soldiers said, hey, you guys, just keep all this down, they made sure they got on a bullhorn and yelled loud enough for everybody up on the city walls to hear them, so that the people inside would start the rumor mill going, oh no, the mighty Assyrians are coming after us. And so some of the things they were telling them was they were mocking the fact that they were trusting in their God. So in verse 19 of 36th chapter of Isaiah, they're quoted as saying, then this is the advanced party. This is the terrifying group that's come in to negotiate a surrender, because otherwise we're coming after you. And they're coming and they're yelling, where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? What about the gods of Sepharvaim? When did anybody deliver Samaria from my hand through their God? They called on all their gods. Who among all the gods of these lands have ever delivered their land from my hand, that the Lord would deliver Jerusalem? You think your God is going to do what nobody else's God was able to do? We went against them, and they claimed their God was going to protect them. And of course they didn't. We own them. We captured them. We're going to do the same thing to you people. And your God is not going to be able to stop you. And so Hezekiah, in his walled city, Jerusalem, he hits the panic buttons, and he did what a lot of us do. He went to church. Isaiah 37 says he entered the house of the Lord. And then he called the prophet, and he asked him to pray. And the prophet said, God will put a spirit in the king of Assyria, and it'll cause him to go back to his own land. And Rabshakeh said, don't let your God deceive you. That's front man for the Assyrian king Sennacherib. Don't let your God deceive you. Which God has stood against us before? You're hearing from your prophet, he's giving you false news. Your God is, don't trust that. And so Hezekiah takes the letter, and he lays it out. The words from Isaiah have come to him, the prophet, and he lays it out. And he said, oh God, deliver us from his hand. All the kingdoms of the earth will know then that you alone, Lord, are God. And so he's still appealing. Isaiah, help me. Isaiah gives him a word. And Isaiah told him to stop worrying about it. God's going to deliver us. And in the night, no longer a rumor, the angel of the Lord went through the Assyrian army and killed 185,000 soldiers. I don't know how they got that count, but somebody counted bodies. 185,000 soldiers died. And those that woke up and realized they'd been spared were anxious to get out of there. You wake up and see 185,000 of your mighty army slain with nobody drawing a sword and nobody invading the camp. You're ready to go. And so King Sennacherib went back to Nineveh, and he went into his temple to pray to his god Nisroch, and his two sons walked into the temple behind him and killed him with a sword, fulfilling the prophecies that Isaiah had said was going to happen. Great story, great victory, great king, building a great legacy, Hezekiah is. And then you come to the next chapter, chapter 38. In those days, Hezekiah became mortally ill. And Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos, came to him and said, "Thus says the Lord, set your house in order, for you shall die and not live." Well, how short-lived are God's blessings and favor. I will slay 185,000 out of the army, and my name will be lifted up, and you'll be the king victorious, and other nations are going to bring gold and silver to you because the rumors out there, every surrounding nation is coming to pay homage to you here, and they're bringing you treats, and they're filling up your treasuries. And then you got sick, and the prophet came and said, "Yep, set your house in order. You're going to die." And Hezekiah didn't want to die. And so he wept and he prayed, and God heard his prayer. I know you've read this story sooner, sometime you've read this story. And God says through the prophet, "I will give you 15 more years since you have prayed, you have wept, and you have come to me the way you have, and you've been so humble. And just in case you still, I don't want you to, you know how you ever had a heart attack and then you think every pain for the next year, you're still going to die? You know, isn't it mighty? I had one at 42. And then thereafter, every time I got a chest pain, I'd go, uh-oh, Elizabeth. I knew only the old people would know. Only the old people know who Elizabeth is. Yeah, high school, you don't know, do you? You'll have to watch an old rerun of Sanford and Sons. "It's a big one, Elizabeth. I'm coming home." I did that for a year. After I had a heart attack, I'm like, for a year, every time I get a show, "Oh, Elizabeth." I'm sure my wife wondered who Elizabeth was. No, she watched Sanford and Sons. And God knew that that's the way we are. All he had to do was say through the prophet, "I'm giving you 15 more years." He'd have lived 15 more years, no problem. And he did. Except God said, "Look, just in case you start doubting and every time you have a pain you think, yep, I'm reneging and you're going, I'm going to give you an irrefutable sign. I will cause the shadow on the stairway, which has gone down with the sun on the stairway of Ahaz. I will cause that shadow to go back 10 steps. Are you kidding me? And so they looked toward the steps of Ahaz, and lo and behold, the shadow was up there, and it was, what? This is unbelievable. Somebody said, "You really think God stopped the solar system?" I don't know. He made the shadow go back 10 steps. How did he do it? I don't care. I don't know. But I know if he did that for me, I would know I'm going to live 15 more years. Any God could do that. However trick he pulled that off, I've got 15 more years. Ain't nobody, I can be Superman. Ain't nobody going to kill me for 15 more years. That's a phenomenal story. And then we got to turn the Bible to the next chapter. And at that time, Merodach Baladan, son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and sent a present to Hezekiah, for he heard that he had been sick and had recovered. And he sent a delegation down to Jerusalem to just check on him. You know why he sent a delegation down to check on him. He was hoping he was mortally ill. He didn't know the story of the 10 steps shadow going backwards. All he knew was the rumors have come, he's dying, he's mortally ill. Let's find out, boys. This could be our chance to take over Judah, get the beautiful city Jerusalem in our bag. So he sends a delegation. You know what Hezekiah did when they came? He showed off. Yep. He showed them everything. Give them a tour. It's in the Bible. Just you can read it sometime when you have time. Not today. I'm preaching now. You can Google it later. And he gives them a tour. Not just Jerusalem. Bring me a few chariots. I'm going to take them down and show them. And he showed them his storehouse in that little town, and his other storehouse over there, and his storehouse over there. And when the delegation's all done and they're headed back, here comes the prophet, those stinking prophets. And he says, unprovoked, just curious, what did you show them? And Hezekiah said, I showed them everything. There is nothing among all my treasures I did not show them. And Isaiah said, behold, there's coming a day. Now you got 15 years. God's not going to take that back. Behold, there's coming a day when all that stuff you showed them, all the riches you bragged about, all the treasure that you gave them a tour of, there's coming a day when all of that will be carried to Babylon, where these men came from. And your sons will eventually work for the king of Babylon. And 100 years later, Nebuchadnezzar would indeed ransack Jerusalem and take all the treasures back to Babylon. And the sons of King Hezekiah would be captives in Babylon and work for him. But our story is about Hezekiah and memorials and miracles and memories. So now that you know the story, let me get us on the same page again. Just a little side rabbit hole. It's really not my sermon, but I thought I'd throw this rabbit hole in. Names were kind of important in the Hebrew, and I did find it interesting that Hezekiah's name meant Jehovah is my strength, Sennacherib's name meant sin multiplied brothers, and Baladan's name means Baal is my Lord, or is his Lord. So forget that. That's just a side note. I thought it was kind of cute. Hezekiah's expression of his greatness was to show the Babylonians of his wealth. Just walk along with me for a moment. Hey, we heard you're sick. He knew why they were there. You think I'm going to fade away? You think I'm going to die in a year and you're going to come in? Let me show you what I have and what I am. He was a king to be reckoned with. He wanted them to know that. He was a winner. Success. He had stuff. Hezekiah's expression of his greatness, his display of his personal wealth and the storehouses in Israel and Judah, showed us that his zeal for the Lord had turned into a personal ambition. Hang your hat on that phrase for just a moment, because that phrase fits a lot of us. We start our Christian walk zealous to be a good Christian and obey God. And at some point, somewhere along the way, if we're not careful, somebody bends our mind to say, you know, when you really please God, you're going to be rich. You're going to be successful. Everything going to work perfect. Isaiah had warned a long time before the Babylonians came. He warned Hezekiah. Don't enter into a treaty with Egypt, with any nation, with all false gods, because it will suggest that the Lord was, and that should say, not able to protect his own people. That's a typo. Now the Babylonians come, and he is willing to enter into a treaty with them, but he wants them to know he has the upper hand because he is wealthy. And so I simply tell you that story to ask you what Hezekiah could have done to avoid this anger from God. Why is such a good, powerful king being punished by God because he simply showed his wealth to men from Babylon who came inquiring? What else could he have done? Why would God do this to him? And I'm going to make a couple of suggestions, so hang on, so we'll be on the same page in a couple of minutes. Did you know that every time God did something marvelous for Israel and Judah, that they set up memorials for it? Hence part of my title today. I just threw a couple of them up there from Jacob, who set up his stone pillar at Bethel, where God visited him with a dream that would change his life forever. And I threw Moses, who put 12 standing stones at the foot of Mount Sinai in Exodus 24 after God gave him the 10 Commandments, and then he broke them. Literally. But he set up 12 stones as an altar, a memorial. And then the Israelites had erected stones to remember their miraculous crossing of the Jordan River. Red Sea, remember that? But that was way down yonder and early in their days. And then they come up to the Jordan, and Moses is not going in with them. Joshua is going to go in. And amazingly, we ignore this story sometimes because the Red Sea gets the big news. But the Jordan, man, there were so many great stories in the Jordan. Even the prophet Elisha caught the mantle of Elijah and walked down to the river Jordan and smote it with Elijah's mantle. And the Bible says, and the waters parted hither and thither to get out of his way so that he could walk across the dry bed of the Jordan River, and the water jumped to get away from him. And the sons of the prophets up on the hill at the school of the prophets that Elijah had founded were watching the whole thing, and they said, oh, the spirit of Elijah must be on Elisha. Look, I guess so. Let's put some stones up here. They knew they weren't permanent. The one that Hezekiah should have remembered was Joshua's standing stone at Shechem. At least he should have remembered that. And Joshua knew we're not building a building here. When Israel memorialized something great God did, they didn't call the architects in. Let's build a tomb. Let's build a monument. Let's build a building. Let's build a temple. They just said, hey, we're going to pass by here again. Our kids are going to pass by here again. Let's just put something here before we move on that reminds our kids what God did for us here. That's what a memorial was. That's why you don't find any today. You don't actually go through Israel. Now, the picture I put up there, that some people say that is Joshua's stone at Shechem, but they don't know that for sure. It's just an odd stone set up. And over the years, it's developed the reputation and rumor of, I think that's the one Joshua set up because it's up by Shechem. So maybe it is, maybe it's not. But the point is that wasn't the point. They weren't trying to build something that would last 1,000 years. They were trying to build something so when their kids passed by and wanted to cross the Jordan River where this particular spot is now, and they'll look over and say, oh, look, remember when God, he may not part the water for us today, but he did one time, and that's why the stones are there. Now, we might have to build a bridge to get over it, but man, remember what God did to get us into the promised land in the first place. We'd have never got in there on our own if it hadn't been for God parting that water. And our dads and granddads said, let's set up some stones here just so that when others pass by, they'll say, what's that? Oh, you hadn't heard? That's a memorial to when God did something great. You with me? You follow me? I'm talking about what could Hezekiah have done besides say, look what I am. Look what I've learned. Look what I've gained. I have finally arrived. I used to be down here. Look where I am up here now. It wasn't about Hezekiah. Nothing to talk about God. Hezekiah didn't say, look at the Lord's wealth. He showed him all of his wealth, the scripture says. His treasure. Isaiah, what did you show them? I showed them, there's nothing of my treasure I did not show them. Well, then good, you're going to lose all that. Why? Because you had an opportunity. You didn't get here because you're rich. You became rich because God blessed. And all God asked you to do a long time ago with anybody was honor, don't forget. Don't let it slide out of your brain. Don't forget the benefits of the Lord. Do not forget through your adversity, David. Don't forget the benefits of the Lord. And so they're just rocks. But so what? They remind me of something God did. He should have told them about the miracles. Isn't it ironic that we go from 37, 38, 39, the scripture leaves a lot of months and a lot of years out. It just progresses to tell us a story. Bam, bam, bam. And then the story's over. And isn't it ironic that we just move quickly through that story and we get it right here in 38. And God said, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to give you 15 more years. And just so you know, to prove my point, I'm going to let the shadow and the steps go back. Oh, man. Wouldn't that be something cool to tell the delegation from Babylon that came? We heard you're sick. What's going to happen if you die? I'm not going to die, boys. Let me tell you what God did. Come here, let me show you some steps. When God gave me his word, the shadow was there. When God said, I'm going to move it back, the shadow came here. The sun was going down. It should not have come here. It should have gone there. God did that. Stick around, boys. I'm here for 15 years. Because God, but nowhere in his tour did he mention God or God's favor or God's blessings. His broken memory, that quickly and that short, his broken memory forgot that he was supposed to forget not the benefits of the Lord. And so I want to just ask you today if your memory is broken and if you can recall any memorials or any miracles in your own life. And then I want to send you home today with that simple word from David that we started with, and that is, don't you ever, please never, don't forget the Lord's benefits. You see, I believe all of us have an opportunity every time God does something to set up some kind of memorial. I think that's the only purpose for him, was to flag the memory. Don't forget God, because here's a quick reminder. The Bible is supposed to be a quick reminder. Of course, that's true. Most of us have a picture or a story or an artifact we can point to in our houses and say, you see that right there? That's when God did this, that, and the other. That's a wonderful thing to keep the brain alive. I've shared with you before. In fact, I will tell you, spoiler alert, the Christmas book you're going to buy in November for your stocking stuffers from Chicken Soup for the Soul is a story about my mother's memorial. If you come in my office at my house, up on the wall above my ukuleles, you'll see one large wicker basket over there, and you'll see one small wicker basket over there. And I'll lay back in my chair sometimes and just look up at them because they remind me. My mom's story was very simple. When my dad died and Mom went through a few years of struggling to make it, none of us knew she was struggling. My siblings and I, every time we call her and talk to her, Mom, how you doing? Mom, you need anything? Mom, everything all right? Mom would always say, everything is fine. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. Don't worry about me. And then years went by, and one time I'm up visiting my mom and helping her take care of a few paperwork issues, and I spent the night with her. And I'm sitting there on her couch looking in her living room, packed bags, ready to leave and come back to Houston. And I just glance up, and on the shelf over there, I see this black lunch pail from a man's metal lunchbox. And I'd seen it there for years, and I just assumed it was something she bought at Hobby Lobby and, stuck up there because that's what it looked like. And so I said, kind of wisecracking, Mom, what in the world is the man's lunchbox up on the cabinet for? And Mom said, oh, son, I never told you about the lunchbox. Well, no, I guess not. And she started telling me, well, sometime after your father passed away, I was not doing very well financially. And then she starts telling me the story. That she got paid monthly, and every month at the end of the month she would run out of money, and it didn't matter how many times she budgeted. There was no way she could stretch her pay. She paid her bills first, and then she bought groceries, and every month she spent the last 2 or 3 days with no coffee, no bread, no milk, and there wasn't anything she could do about it. She'd tried budgeting, and she said, I made a game out of it. I pretended that I was doing it for health reasons. Or sometimes I would say, I'm fasting. I'm just going to pretend I'm fasting for 2 days and not have anything to eat. That's all right. That's good. I've fasted before. And then one month she was sick. She fell ill before the end of the month, and she needed something desperately. She really needed food, and she ran out of money. And so one morning she couldn't miss work. She didn't have sick days with her job. And so she just got up one morning and she said, please, God, please, anything. I'm not asking for much. I'll just take anything from you today. And feverish and sick, she goes out to the driveway to get in her car, and a pickup truck comes rattling down the gravel road she lived on, and about the time it got past her driveway flying, she heard a clanging of metal and looked up in time to see a black lunch pail falling off that truck and him zooming by. She backed out, pulled down, stopped, walked over and got it out of the grass, got back and was going to catch him at a red light, and he wasn't there. She knew he'd probably be at the red light around the corner down by the highway. She hurried driving down there. He wasn't there, and he was out of sight, and she had to go to work. And on her way driving to work, she looked over at that lunchbox, and she thought, God, you probably wouldn't mind, would you? You just wouldn't mind if I just looked to see what's in there. She opened it. There were 2 sandwiches just like she would have made if she'd have had lunch meat. There was a bag of chips. There was a cookie or 2, an apple, and a thermos full of hot coffee. Oh, coffee, she said. I missed coffee the most the last few days of the month. So I figured God, I prayed that morning, God wouldn't mind. If I saw the man, I'd replace it. And so I drank that coffee, and I rationed those sandwiches out for the next 2 or 3 days, and I made it. And so I never did see the man again, but thereafter I wouldn't throw this lunch pail away for anything in the world. I put it up on a shelf because it reminds me that God is an amazing provider. And then when she finished her story, I just looked at her and I said, you make me so mad. She said, what? I said, you are such a liar. You are such a liar. What is wrong with you, son? You know how mad that makes me? Your sons and your daughters, every time we call you, we say, are you okay? You need anything? How you doing on money? And you say, oh, I'm fine. You lie. Not one of your kids would have ever let you miss a meal. If we had known you were hungry. Oh, I was mad. I gritted my teeth. I was mad. I can't believe you did this. Oh, son, that was so long ago, it doesn't matter anymore. It does matter. And she just brushed me off and laughed and said, oh, son, remember the baskets? I told you about the baskets a long time ago. And she did. Philosophizer mom. Mom's philosophy at some point in my youth, when I was fussing about how unfair life was, Mom's philosophy was, son, everybody in life gets 2 baskets. Everybody does. You get a blessing basket and you get a cursing basket. And everybody's blessing basket is bigger than their cursing basket. But the secret to happiness in life is which basket you choose to carry. And with that, she picked up a big laundry wicker basket, put her arms around it, and held it right here. And she said, you got to choose to carry the blessing basket in life. I said, well, what do you do with the cursing basket? Oh, she nudged it with her foot. You just put it over there somewhere. somewhere. You got to carry the blessing basket. And then when people call you and say, how are you doing, Mom? You just look down in that basket you're holding. You say, I'm fine. Because you are. When you remember the blessing of the Lord that you live under. Now, I'm telling you, to this day, you can ask my kids, my wife, you ask me how I am, I'll tell you, I'm wonderful. I might not be. You will never know, because I choose to look in the basket that I choose to hold, and the basket I choose to hold is God is still good in spite of the fact. In spite of the fact. I lost that, I hurt there, I had to do that, I went to the hospital, but I choose this basket. And I'll look down in it and tell you life is good, because I will not forget all his benefits, which is why a large wicker basket hangs on my office wall at home, and a small basket over there at that end. And that's the basket I'll lay back in the chair and look up at and remind me. It's just a memorial. Are you hearing me today? It's a reminder. That's all it is. It's a reminder. And now I jump to Hebrews, the 11th chapter, and you know the story. We nickname it the roll call of the heroes of faith. I write a lot of stories. They're true. The stories that I've sold, the Chicken Soup for the Soul, and over the years, 72 short stories, little articles and short stories I've sold, have always been because that's my way of creating a memorial. I don't put stones together on the side of the road. But if something impacts my life and something affects me and something draws me closer to God and something makes my faith have more value and meaning, I write a story out of it. Once in a while, it took me a long time to figure out, hey, I can actually sell these now and then and make a little money. So that took me a long time to figure that out. And so forgive me. Don't ever think that I'm trying to write a story because I'm trying to make a few dollars. I'm actually writing a story because it's my memorial. You've heard most of them. You've heard me talk about becoming so depressed that I would lay down on the floor of my living room one night when I thought nothing had ever worked right and I was done and I wasn't even sure if I had faith in God anymore. And I laid down in the middle of the floor and I said, God, I'm not even sure you ever hear us when we pray. My prayers seem to be coming back as if heaven's brass. I think I'm done. I think I'm done because you're not hearing me anyway. You're just not. My wife had long since gone to bed. My kids were asleep, waiting to get up and go to junior high or somewhere. And the next morning, and sometime around midnight, I'm laying on the floor in my living room on a hickory post, and I've gotten in a prostrate position. I'm just laid down on the floor, and I said, God, you're not listening. You don't hear. And I'm done. Financially, spiritually, mentally, I'm just done. I don't know what that means, but I mean I'm quitting because you don't listen. I may leave my wife. I'm going to walk out of the church. I'll resign. And I went to bed and laid down by a woman who did not know that when the sun came up tomorrow morning, I would probably be saying to her, I'm done. I'm moving on. I'm retiring. I'm resigning. I'm quitting. I'm done. 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, my phone rang. We didn't have caller ID. We had Princess phones. I reached over to pick up the Princess phone at 2 or 3 in the morning because I knew it meant somebody was in the hospital or somebody had died. And I picked up the phone and I quietly said, yes. And a man said, is this Danny Carpenter? And I said, it is. Are you the Danny Carpenter that has written some stories? It is. Are you the Danny Carpenter that lives in Tomball? It is. You passed. What, man, you got me. What do you want? Who is this? You don't know me. We've never met. I'm calling you, I think you said from Waco. I don't remember, but it's somewhere in Texas. Not close. I'm calling you from. I said, okay, well, you got me, bud. What's up? I'm trying to be quiet so my wife wouldn't wake up. And he said, I feel stupid. I said, hey, man, I'm awake. Let's just get to the point. And he starts telling me, he said, I feel so stupid. I've never done this before. Never done it to anybody. Never had this feeling. But he said, the last few days, man, you're a total stranger to me. And every time I pray, it's like God says, call Danny Carpenter. And I'm like, God, I don't know him. Well, you can get his number out of a minister's book somewhere, which we had back in those days. And so he said, I put it off, I put it off, I put it off, I put it off. And he said, and I've just finally decided I'm losing my mind. I'm never going to make that call until tonight. And I tried to lay down at 10 o'clock, and I keep waking up every 15 minutes. And he said, I got, now that you're on the phone and I've awakened you, I feel so stupid. I feel so stupid because it's like God just told me to tell you two things and two words, and now I've got, and I said, will you just tell me what you think, God, the unknown, the unspeakable God, the one that never lives. Will you just tell me? And he said, Mr. Carpenter, please forgive me. I hope we never meet now after this, because I'm terribly embarrassed. It seems awful foolish. And I said, just tell me what you think you're supposed to say. And he says, just two words. Here it is. God hears. Does that mean anything to you? Does that mean anything to me? It was necessary for me to get out of bed. It was not enough for me to just lay in bed and say, thank you, God, I'm sorry. I needed to go back in the living room. I needed to get back on the carpet. I needed to lay back down in that spot where I quit God a few hours earlier. I needed to lay right back there so that I could say, God, can I start over from where I was? And then I felt this rush of faith and this rush of peace. And I know I hesitated telling anybody about it at the time because it'd be embarrassing to admit I was depressed and down. And a year later, I'm like, even if I say it, somebody else has been depressed and nobody called them at 2 o'clock in the morning, total stranger, so it'd be kind of unfair. And that's not the point. The point is, if it happens to you, it's worth sharing with somebody. And finally, I said, I got to write this. I just got to write it. It's going to help somebody. And so I wrote it. And then over the years, I got to noticing once in a while, I'd get a phone call from a total stranger who just read something that somebody printed. And they would say, you don't know me, and I'm not going to tell you my name, but I need to ask you for prayer. Why me? Because you told the story. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I built the memorial, and they saw the monument. Not to I'm rich and successful. No. They saw the monument that I crossed the river of depression one day. And I was ready to end it. And I didn't want to go any further. And God parted the waters and made it easier. And I'd be foolish not to stop and build something there that would keep my memory alive. A little memorial. That's why I write stories. But then I come to Hebrews, the 11th chapter, and I read the roll call of the heroes of faith. By faith, Moses. By faith, Noah. By faith, Abraham. By faith, blah, 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 blah. And then you turn to the next chapter. Seeing then that we are surrounded by this great cloud of witnesses. Oh, man. You, in this building, you are living stones, Peter said. You're living, can I paraphrase? You're living memorials. Can I even paraphrase Hebrews' word? Can I tell you, you are seeing that we are encompassed about, seeing that we're surrounded by such a great cloud of memorials. I mentioned a few of you last week, but I hope I'm not out of line here this morning before you go, but I'm just going to tell you, some of you, when we talk about not forgetting the Lord's benefits, we're not saying, hey, my life's been, it's a lucky charm for me because I serve God. No. David wasn't saying, I've never had any problems. David was saying, in spite of all I've gone through, I must never forget the Lord's benefits. And I'm telling you, if I offend some of you, please forgive me. I got 5 minutes to just quit. And I don't want you to be offended by it, but some of you, Rhonda, I am telling you, you are a living memorial. And because I've had people call and say, my son or my daughter, that they reach the point of depression. And I don't know if I can take it anymore because, and I've held you up. And I've said, I know a woman who, not long ago, we had a memorial right here for a man whose daughter took her life. And in conversation with him saying, I don't know what to do. Pastor, I don't know what to do. My consolation that he would be all right in time to come is that I get to look at a monument and a memorial every Sunday that says you can put the pieces back together and you can live again. And it's not going to be easy, but somewhere in the middle of your worst pain and your worst nightmare, God still comes and he holds you together. And the pieces of a broken heart can be scattered into oblivion. And God prophesied by this man that we're quoting today, Isaiah. It was Isaiah who prophesied, and he will, when the Messiah comes, and he will bind up the broken hearts. And I'm telling you, I have consolation today. Taylor and Jordan are here today, and it's so nice to see you today. And they lost a baby here a while back, a few weeks ago. The day will come, nothing will ever replace that. But you're here today. And the day will come that somehow, amazingly, God will take the pieces of broken hearts and pull them back together enough to sustain. And then he'll love on us enough that finally, one day, we're able to say like David, man, I've been through it. But I must not forget all his benefits. And I've been in this position long enough to know that somewhere down the road, I'm going to get another late night phone call from somebody who will be saying, I can't go on. And I'll be able to say, let me show you a monument. Let me point your attention to a memorial that was set up by somebody just like you, who also felt the pain of despair the worst way they ever could and didn't know if they'd ever laugh again. But they will. They did. The day will come that you will simply be another reminder that no matter how hard and rough life is, we can't forget all of God's benefits. Look at all of you around this room. I wish sometimes that there was just a format, a medium, where we could just tell our lives. It'd be embarrassing. You would not want to hear mine. Well, you've heard some of mine through stories, but you won't want to hear all. The ones I haven't written, you don't want to ever hear that. But oh man, I told a reporter last year, a reporter from Houston Chronicle called me on the story about Sandy and Allison. And Sandy was 7 months pregnant with Allison. A truck ran a red light and broadsided her in a small Toyota. They lost the heartbeat of the baby. And Allison, it was about a month later. We went a month, no heartbeat. Doctor had already prepared us for stillbirth. You got to remember this 1975, before all these scans and all the stuff they have, no computers. And so they didn't know. There was no heartbeat. They prepared us. Doctor said, it's normal for a few days. We'll find the heartbeat by next Monday. Come back next Monday. We went every Monday. 5 weeks later, he just said, nothing's going to happen. Just be prepared for stillbirth, baby. Thank you, sir. Is it running? Is my nose running? And so we prepared for a stillborn baby. And then we decided one night after that 5th week, we're so depressed, let's at least go to a rally. North Park Hotel was having a Christian crusade, a singing. And we just went to hear some gospel music. And my old pastor saw us, hadn't seen him in a long time, come running across the foyer as we were slipping out to leave. And he said, Daddy boy. And he reached up and played with my ear, like he did when I was a little boy. He was such a loving man. And he looked at my wife and didn't know the story and saw her belly. And he said, is it okay if I pray with you before y'all slip out? I just like to pray for all the mamas and having babies in my church. And I know you're not in my church, but... And she said, okay. No, and we weren't going to tell him, we don't have a baby coming. And so he made her lay her hand on her tummy, and he laid his hand on her tummy, and he just whispered a quiet prayer, Lord, let this baby be born perfectly, in perfect health. We didn't have the heart to tell him, stop, stop. And so we went home depressed and cried and laid down in the middle of the night. She woke up screaming. I jumped up and grabbed my trousers and the little suitcase we kept packed because he'd told us one night, you got to come to the hospital whenever it happens. And I jumped up. She kept yelling, no, no, no. And I knew she was in pain. And finally, she flipped on the light. And she said, stop. And I stopped. And she had her hand on her tummy. She was crying. She said, come feel. And I went over. And the baby was kicking for the first time in 5 weeks. Gave birth, perfectly happy, perfectly normal. Everything was okay. I wrote that story. A reporter from the Houston Chronicle called me. And he sounded like an agnostic, and he said on the phone at one point, he said, Mr. Carpenter, you don't actually believe your baby was dead in that womb for 5 weeks, do you? And that God just made it live again. And I said, I don't know. Let me just tell you an honest answer. I do not pretend to know what God did. All I know is I was prepared for a stillbirth baby, and then my baby lived. That's all I know. And he said, well, you know, sometimes I get a little bent out of shape over Christians, you know, who claim God did this, God did that. And, you know, miracles like the flood. He said, I wrote a bunch of stories about Harvey and some people giving God credit for saving them when their neighbors died and drowned. And I said, hey, I'm with you, bud. I agree with you completely. And then I said to him, I said, let me tell you, Bill, let me tell you what I see every Sunday morning. Here's the miracle to me. The miracle is not that I will tell you what happened to my baby in the womb of my wife. The miracle is that every Sunday morning I look at a congregation of people, some of whom have been through hell in life. Their plans haven't worked. Their finances have failed. They get sick. Their loved ones die. We do funerals multiple times a year that we had prayed for the death not to occur. And yet, every Sunday, I get to look at people who said, God, please don't let this happen. And when it happened, anyway, they didn't lose their faith. They're still connected to God. They still come back like David and they say, didn't work like I wanted it to. But bless the Lord, O my soul. I will not forget his benefits. Like Job, the Lord gives, the Lord takes. I don't know why. I won't pretend to understand. But I would just always say, blessed be the Lord. You are memorials to the miraculous, not because your lives have been perfect, but because through your imperfect and painful life, you are still here today to worship and love God. Stand, please. Somebody say, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. Give the Lord a hand of praise. Father, thank you. Father, thank you today. We love you. We praise you. We will never forget all your benefits. Our pain cannot take away your promise, and we love you today. Amen. Shake hands and hug somebody and love on somebody, and we'll see you next Sunday morning, 10:30.